63,000 Ukrainians are ready to engage and obliterate Russians. In the east, Ukrainians seize the advantage and Russians start to advance backwards. And recently, Putin finally showed his true colors and almost literally announced a war on civilians. And finally, Ukrainians are doing surprising tactics in the south, which will only work knowing the Russian mentality. But more about all of this in just a couple of minutes. What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. And let's get straight to the point and talk about some ridiculous Russian propaganda. So recently in the high school in Russia, they decided to introduce a new course for history, the history of this special military operation and the relations of Russia and the West. And just some of the chapters in this course will sound as following, so just please pay attention. First of all, it is the relations of Russia and the Western countries. Sounds kinda okay, but then it's gonna be the pressure of the US against Russia, then it's gonna be falsification of history, the resurrection of Nazis and neo-Nazis in Ukraine, then it's gonna be the return of Crimea in 2014, the history of Donbass, a region, why Russia had to start this special military operation, and finally, why Russia is a land of heroes. So just please let me know in the comments whether you would like to take this course. Because as Putin previously mentioned, the best weapon against propaganda is to always tell truth. And that's exactly how he tricked thousands, and at this point hundreds of thousands of Russian men to join his army and fight for his ego and very questionable goals. And if you would never join Putin's army and instead consider joining the Russian dude army, can you please like this video and subscribe to my channel? You can also follow my second channel, The Russian Dude Clips, where I post under 1-minute summaries every single day. The link is down below. But okay, and now let's talk about the Western military support to Ukraine. 63,000 Ukrainians are ready to engage and obliterate Russians. Then we'll move to the east, where Ukrainians seized the advantage and made Russians to advance backwards, before moving to the south, where Putin revealed his true face and literally announced the war on civilians. And we will finalize everything with this new surprising tactics by Ukrainians. And so yes, in this first video you can see the British tanks Challenger 1s almost finished being repaired and to be sent to Ukraine. Next we have a picture of a Swedish armored combat vehicle BG-BV-90, which Ukrainians are using on Liman front lines. Then the countries of Belgium, the Netherlands and Luxembourg are about to send armored personnel carriers to Ukraine M113. And most importantly, recently there has been yet another Ramstein meeting where countries of Denmark, the Netherlands, UK will pledge hundreds of missiles to Ukraine. Canada is giving $500 million to Ukraine. Denmark is also giving $2.6 billion military support package to Ukraine before 2024. And then once again, Denmark and the Netherlands are pledging 14 Leopard 2 tanks. And then some other even more crucial statements have been made. First of all is that the Western countries realize that Ukraine needs to prioritize the occupation, military equipment and vehicles. That is why America, for example, will be sending Bradleys, Strykers, artillery systems and demining equipment. And most importantly, 17 brigades or approximately 63,000 soldiers have already finalized their training. They'll be returning to Ukraine ready to engage and obliterate Russians with their new knowledge of the Western military tactics. And so, what about Russia? Well, some of you might know about the existence of BRICS, which is the coalition of countries such as Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa. And so, in the near future there'll be a meeting of these presidents. And Putin said that he will not be coming. Instead, Russia will be represented by the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Sergei Lavrov. And I mean, just think about it. If you as a political leader you think that you're on the right side of the history, why would you constantly hide in your bunker, never show up on public and never even leave your country? Take a look at Zelensky, for example. He's traveling and meeting other presidents pretty much every single week. So whenever Putin is saying that yes, we are the good ones, we are the righteous ones, we are doing the right thing, and then he does not even want to meet his alleged friends, This is pretty questionable and suspicious, but what do I know? Let me know in the comments what do you think. Right, and now let's very quickly talk about the situation in the east, where Ukrainians recently seized the advantage and Russians started to advance backwards. Before we move to the south, talk about the true face of Putin and surprising tactics of Ukrainians. But first of all, unfortunately, we just have to make a stop in Kiev, where recently the capital of Ukraine has been attacked by Russian Shahid drones. Then we move to the actual east of Ukraine, where according to the Ukrainian general Alexander Syrsky and Anna Malyar, the initiative of Ukrainians along Kupiansk-Svatove-Kreminna frontline is already on Ukrainian side, and these attacks that Russians anticipated in the last couple of days, they already completely failed. It is even confirmed by the Institute for the Study of War that yes, recently there has been an increase on activity from the Russian side, and they even made some marginal gains. But as of right now, nothing else pretty much is happening. Ukrainians are pressuring against Russians so much and forcing them to, as Russians said once again propaganda, to advance backwards. And in confirmation of this, we have this video from the forest areas in the eastern front lines, where we can see a high intensity close combat footage from Ukrainian side, and you can clearly see how they are pushing Russians away. The video is packed with successful action from the Ukrainian side. That is why, for obvious reasons, YouTube will not allow it, but you can always see the full version on my Patreon. The link is down below. There's still 1 week of free access. Next we have the report by the General Staff of Ukraine, which claims that Ukrainians were able to push Russians fully away from Orekhovo-Vasilievka, as you can see confirmed by this map. And then as we take a look at the changes in territorial control, yes, Russians did advance backwards a little bit from Orekhovo-Vasilievka. They also went a little bit further from Yekhidne, and as you go down to Klishivka, this is where Russians were advancing backwards the most, and Ukrainians recaptured a big territory to the west of this settlement. And ultimately, as we go all the way down to Marinka, yet another, believe it or not, extremely modern battle tank of Russians T-90 has been destroyed with a simple drone and a grenade. And just overall, in the last 24 hours, Ukrainians were able to destroy 1 control point of Russians, 16 artillery units, 3 ammunition warehouse, and 3 electronic warfare pieces of equipment. Right, and now as promised, let's go to the south, where we can talk about Putin finally revealing his true face to the rest of the world by announcing a war on civilians, and we'll finalize everything by talking these surprising tactics of Ukrainians. And if you remember, in revenge for Ukrainians attacking Crimean Bridge, Russians announced their attacks against territory of Ukraine, such as for example Odessa, where shelling continued for 2 days straight. As you can see from this video, and according to the Ministry of Defense of Russia, the targets were only military related, such as for example the ammunition and drone warehouses. But right now I will tell you exactly which objects were destroyed. So, first of all, a lot of missiles, drones and their debris fell in residential areas, damaging civilian buildings and injuring civilians. Next, Russians were able to destroy a marketplace which were selling fruits, vegetables and other civilian goods. In addition to that, in Odessa alone, reportedly 3,000 civilians were left without electricity. But most importantly, unfortunately, Russians also attacked the Odessa port, destroying reportedly 60,000 tons of grains. And as you can see from this map, as soon as Russia left this grain deal, they pretty much blocked the entire entrances and exits to Ukraine. Those ships remaining in Odessa port were not able to leave, and the new ones were not able to enter the territory of Ukraine. But the worst thing later came from the Ministry of Defense of Russia, which then was also reiterated by President Putin himself, is that from now on every single ship, doesn't matter what it is, carrying out of territory of Ukraine, will be considered by Russians as a ship carrying military equipment. That is why Russia will consider these vessels as legitimate military targets. And this order came into effect this midnight July 20th, which pretty much means that Putin finally revealed his true face for the rest of the world, including his allies, and practically he declared a war on civilians. But unfortunately, the Russian attacks did not end here. Some loud noises were also reported in city of Mykolaiv, also in residential areas. And then, as a result of this attack, a lot of toxic dust was able to go into the air in Zaporozhye region, as you can see from this video. And I mean, just take a look at this map, which allegedly shows all the missiles and drones that Russia launched against Ukraine. This is just pretty much countless number of them. And the regions which were affected the most were the Dnipro, Kharkov, Zaporozhye, Kherson and Odessa regions. And as you can see, all of these targets were far from the front lines. But nevertheless, Ukrainian air defense was able to intercept at least 37 of these missiles and drones. And what is even more mind-blowing is that besides repelling so many of Russian attacks, Ukrainians still were able to yet destroy another ammunition warehouse of Russians located in Crimean Peninsula. Though the Russian propaganda said that the cause of this fire was unknown, probably somebody was smoking in an inappropriate place, so as you can see, they cannot even acknowledge that Ukrainians are destroying their military targets fair and square. But so yes, now let's quickly talk about the situation in the south and finally about these surprising tactics by Ukrainians. And so first of all, according to the report by the Institute for the Study of War, the major concentration of combat activities right now is in between Zaporozhye and Donetsk regions and also in the western Zaporozhye. And just once again, it has already been confirmed by the Western allies that one of the main reasons why Ukrainian counteroffensive is so relatively slow, it is because large areas are full of mines and defense structures. And as you can see from this video, Ukrainians are using any means possible and necessary to destroy as many Russian mines as possible. To be honest, the consequences of just explosion of these 3 mines is so above your expectations. This was truly unexpected even for me. If you want to see it yourself, the full video is on my Patreon, the link is down below. And as a result of all these hostilities, Ukrainians were able to advance a little bit closer to Robotyne, and then they were also able to liberate a little bit land to the west of Novopokrovka. And as we move a little bit more to the east, Ukrainians, as you can see from this map, were able to liberate a pretty good area to the west of Novodonetsk. And just overall, according to the representatives from Ukrainian military, Ukrainian forces resumed their offensive in Melitopol direction, and then they also established the control over Staromayorsk, located right here, which surprisingly has a very good strategic location, and here's why. If we zoom into this area, we can see that Staromayorsk is located right on the border between Zaporozhye and Donetsk regions, and just knowing the Russian bureaucracy, I'm telling you, there are different formations. One of them is responsible for protecting Zaporozhye region, and another is responsible for protecting Donetsk region. And as soon as Ukrainians start to actively push against one of these formations, and this formation will obviously ask for help for the second one, the second formation will say something like this, and I'm almost certain this will happen. So the second formation will say, this is not our land, this is not our responsibility, we have our own territories to protect, so best of luck to you. Because luckily for Ukrainians, Russians do not fight for the same goal. Whatever honestly this goal is, probably just not to be prosecuted by Putin for not following his orders. And by attacking exactly in that settlement right in between Zaporozhye and Donetsk regions, Ukrainians most likely will be able to achieve and exploit on this success, liberate more territories, and later the road for future settlements, which are much more bigger settlements such as Mariupol, will be open for Ukrainians. And as always, I will be right here doing my best and try to find the most recent news to report them for you. So just once again, if you don't want to miss them, please consider subscribing to my channel. Only takes one click. The absolutely best way to support my work is through my Patreon. You can also become my channel member and unlock channel perks, or simply use a PayPal link. Everything can be found to the right and down below. Thank you so much for your attention, товарищи. Please follow me on Instagram, beware there are scammers in the comments, and see you tomorrow.